Hello, everybody. So excited to meet you all over again. It's really a delight that we connect through Smoothie with Sharon. And this happens the last Friday of every month. I can't begin to tell you how grateful I am to meet such wonderful people through this particular episode that we have. We meet people who walk their purpose in life, and it's so amazing when I hear them and I learn so much from them, and I'm able to bring this beautiful conversation to all of you. My name is Sandhya Shri. I'm a holistic lifestyle coach practicing for the past 2 decades, mother to two beautiful girls aged 22 and 18. Today, joining me on this particular episode is from the Sharon team, Dr. Suman Goel. She is a PhD in biology and she retired as an advisor from the Department of Microtechnology. So it's so amazing to have her here. And I would like Dr. Suman to switch on a video and say a quick hello to everybody.
Thank you, Sandhya Shri, for having me. Warm welcome to everyone.
I must be thanking Dr. Suman. It was her brainchild to may do this episode with Mr. Satyajit, and we are very grateful that we could do this. Thank you, Dr. Suman, and we hope we rock it. Mr. Satyajit has also joined us. I'm so glad. So before I move on to our guest, I'd like to tell you, Sharon stands for Sanctuary for Health and Reconnection with Animals and Nature. And our founder, Dr. Nandita, actually had a 5-point plan for people who want to go plant-based. The first thing she always said was, always eat food in the whole form. Second, she said, be plant-based. Third, she said, make sure whatever you consume is organic in nature. It's an organic produce. And she always said, keep a check on your B12 and D3. Today, our guest is someone who's actually made it possible for all of us to have organic produce. He has worked a lot in this sector and actually has made it very fashionable to be a farmer. To start with, Mr. Satyajit, Satyajit is a person who is a 4th generation farmer. He, along with his brother, started his two brothers' organic farm in Pune, close to Maharashtra. And in this 21-acre land, they actually do natural and regenerative farming. He is one of those people who let go of a lucrative job to pursue farming. And I can't begin to thank him enough for having agreed to come on the show. And you will be so surprised at the kind of answers he's going to give you. He's not only going to tell you some very basics of how organic farming is so good for the planet, and also be answering some very simple questions about why organic produce is expensive and how we can make it affordable for all of us. Without further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Satyajit into the show. And I'm a little nervous because I have not met him myself. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandhya Shri. A very good evening. And thank you, Team Sharan, for having me over to talk with you guys.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. To start with, we all receive signs from the universe, and we all know it's a sign, but very rarely we are able to really take that sign very seriously and pursue it. You are one such person who actually understood the sign the universe was giving you, and you took that sign very seriously. And today you're walking your path towards your life purpose, that is to be a farmer. How was this journey?
Absolutely.
How was the switch? And was it difficult? Was there a lot of difficulty that you faced? We want to hear it all today from you.
Thank you. I agree. Life shows you signs, but I think even the time has to come where you realize that these are signs. So, Sandhya Shri, to start with, we are sons of farmers born in this village where we are right now, farming in. It's a village called Bhodni. It's on the outskirts of Pune, 150 kilometers south of Pune. My father's a farmer, my mother's a farmer, and when we were born and we were getting raised up in the village, so they put us in a boarding in a school in Pune. And we studied out there. We did our college education in Pune. We did our post-graduation in Pune. And after working for around 4 or 5 years in the corporate world, doing what society wanted us to do, doing what our parents wanted us to do, we got great jobs, we got good companies, a good career path, roamed across the world doing our jobs. But something felt missing. Something felt that it was not right. The feeling that you have one life to live kind of grew on us very strongly. And we started looking back at ourselves and started seeing what we love or what we would love spending our time doing. And increasingly, when we thought about this, farming was that came to our head. In our holidays, we used to be on the farm in the Diwali holidays, summer holidays. We were amongst our livestock. We were amongst farmers growing food on the farm, amongst the greenery, and that appealed to us tremendously. But we were conditioned so strongly by all the forces around us that this is not the life you should be looking up to. If you want to come, you retire and come back to this life. Never come back in your prime, years and stuff. So it took us some great thinking, and ultimately we decided that even after seeing the world and doing what the world wants us to, what the world wants us to do, it's not appealing to us. It's not satisfying. So why not get back to farming? Now, when this thought cropped up, it took us another 2-3 years for us to muster that courage and to ultimately leave aside a job, a life in the city, against everybody's wishes, and to kind of go against the tide and come back in the village, settle down in the village and do farming. There were many signs that were showing up. At age 26, 27, both me and Ajinkya were in a boarding school. Sports was very intrinsic to boarding. We played a lot of sport. But when we got to doing jobs, we were sitting down for 8 hours working, and both of us got our back in bad shape. We had disc herniations at the age of 26 and 27. We were advised surgery then, and we started thinking that this is not what we are. We thought we were physically very fit and stuff, and what is happening to us? So physically, it was showing up. Mentally, we were not having focus, not enjoying what we were doing. Intellectually, it was not very stimulating. Spiritually, we weren't feeling ourselves that we were growing. So all this combined, I think it pushed us into a corner where the only ray of light we saw was to pursue what our mind, what our sixth sense was telling us. It was that light at the end of the tunnel which told us, come back to farming, forget the money, forget the career, forget the limelight, forget what society wants you all to do. Just try doing this and see. And we had age on our hands, so we thought, let's get down to farming. Let's go out there. Let's at least enjoy what we want to do. Forget all the layers on top of it of business and life and lifestyle and stuff. So we came back to farming around 8 years back. Ajinkya quit his job first. I quit later, a year and a half, and we came back to do full-time farming. So that's till the start of the journey.
Amazing. And it's so beautiful how physically, mentally, intellectually, and spiritually there were layers of signs that you saw, and you paid attention to it. Very few of us have the guts that you both have. And, really we salute you from the Sharan team for having done what you have done. And, it's very inspiring. And during the pandemic, I don't know how many people were inspired to become a farmer, because everybody realized the best nutrition is from what you eat. It's not about anything else. And fresh air is so important. And, I was wanting to remind you, I remember watching one of your videos and how you spoke about you actually healed yourself walking barefoot on your farmland. Can you tell us a little about that?
So I told you we were advised surgery at the age of 20, 25, 26. I couldn't walk 10 meters. I had to sit down for that nerve to get released and for, that pain in my leg to move off and stuff. And it was debilitating. And the best of doctors, I did an MRI and surgery was advised. But whenever I came to the farm for the holidays or the weekends, and I used to walk on mud and in the farm surface and all, I could walk 2 kilometers. But in a city, on a footpath, on a road, on tiles, in the office, in a corporate place, I couldn't walk more than 10 meters. And that got me thinking, why is this happening when I can walk on the farm, but I can walk on tile surfaces? And then I spoke to many people. There's a nice chiropractor in Pune who's also a kind of a guy who's got a yoga background to it. And he told me, there is this situation where when you walk on uneven surfaces, it's better for your back. When you walk on predictable, even surfaces, it's not good for your back. And ultimately, he said that your energy is not flowing out and meeting the universe. It's stuck somewhere because you're not doing what you love. So why don't you try doing farming? And we tried this. And, long story short, Sandhya Shri, 12 years back, I had had those MRIs. I had done 2 MRIs. It shows a marking severe disc herniations, surgery advised immediately. It's been 12 years. I didn't go for any surgery. I started doing farming, started working on the farm, started picking up cow dung, started, manuring the farm, started sowing, harvesting, picking, doing all the activities. We drive down to Mumbai for a farmer's market every Sunday, 350 kilometers ourselves. It's a 700-kilometer drive to and from. We pick up load that's 80 kgs. We, fill trucks, we remove trucks, we work on the farm, no surgery. Today we can walk for 28,000 steps a day on an average without any pain. We are at a physical best. And I wonder where that disc herniation is gone. I wonder what that report, if I do an MRI now, says. But it's healed amazingly. I know there is science to it. I know there is a lot that's not only physical, it's mental, it's intellectual, it's spiritual. When you're doing something you love, you go above pain. When you're, in constant touch with the natural elements of nature, water, soil, fire, sky, I believe those are the best healing mediums. And we have had a first-hand experience of all that.
That's such a powerful story. I can't begin to tell you. We couldn't have had a better opening, Mr. Satyajit. It's amazing. Really, nature
Absolutely.
really heals. All the elements of nature have the power to heal. All your talks, your whatever you come out with, or the content you have on your website, you always emphasize about the soil and the importance of soil. So can you just tell us in layman's term to our viewers, why is there so much emphasis on soil, and we need to understand what the soil requires?
So when we came back to do farming, now when you look at the farming landscape, the contemporary farming landscape, there are so many chemicals that farmers are using. They have knowledge of detailed chemistry, names, formulas. There is NPK, there is macronutrients, there is micronutrients, there is pesticides, insecticides, herbicides. And when we came back, we didn't have a background in farming. We had come back, I did my economics and my MBA and worked in a banking and came back to farming, educated his MBA and came back to farming. We were never exposed to the farm landscape. So we were freshers and we didn't understand this, so much of complex nutrients, chemical based and stuff. Then we started knowing what and how farmers did farming before all these chemicals were introduced. So we got in touch with the older people in the village. We started asking them, how were things done? And those guys are yet our co-workers, and they were telling us, 40 years back, before these chemical fertilizers were introduced, the productivity of the land was around 80 tons of sugarcane per acre, only on manure, and now it's come to 30, 35 tons per acre with urea, potash, sulfur, magnesium, 100 chemical inputs. So we realized that though if these fancy chemicals were being introduced by science and modern agricultural practices, the overall productivity of the land is going down. If you chart a graph of the last 40 years, you can see that productivity is falling down. You can see that the input cost has gone up. Farmers never do this. Farmers don't keep data and study data. But for us, it was a clear indication that if we continue this kind of farming, soon we'll be in a situation where our land will not produce anything. Soon we'll have unfertile land. What will we pass on to our next generation? What will we produce? So that got us into questioning holistic practices. And we went about meeting organic farmers across India, across Maharashtra, farmers who seem illiterate, who don't know how to read and write, but they're highly educated. And why I say this is because I believe education is when you deep dive within yourself to learn. And these guys had a spiritual bent of mind, and that's how they took to organic farming. They lived with nature, they lived with a lot of biodiversity, geo or geno was their concept. And we saw how this entire holistic concept is about organic farming, and it appealed to us. And then we got into knowing the scientific aspects. We started following many microbiologists, we started following many traditional farmers, and we got things together and started doing our experiments. And that's where we come to soil. That's where we understood that all that you see on the farm is not important as much as what is below the farm. Those 6 inches of soil, are the health. That's 90% of the health of the crop on top and the farm in general. So soil is living vibrantly. And to give you a measure of that, when you take one scoop, one spoonful of fertile organic soil. It has more microorganisms than there are humans on Earth. It has close to 7 to 8 billion microorganisms. It has bacteria, fungi, nematode, protozoa, 100 other creatures that your eyes cannot see, apart from the creatures that your eyes can see, like your earthworms and small insects and stuff. And we understood that it was this microbiology in the soil that ultimately started mining the ground, which is rich of all the nutrients, but it is in an unavailable format. And it made that nutrient available to the tree. And that's a very nice symbiotic relationship that the tree has with the nutrients, and the medium is the microbiology. And when you administer chemical fertilizers, acidic based fertilizers, you're killing that microbiology. So we got to know that the soil is where you have to focus entirely. You don't need to look up on what's growing. What's growing is a direct correlation of what's in the soil. Your focus has to be completely on the soil. And that's how we arrived at that conclusion that soil is the most important factor when you're farming.
In life, they always say, look within for all your answers. So all you need to do in organic farming is 6 inches within the soil and you have all your answers. I'd like you to also tell us the beautiful story that happened, which is the incident in your farm about porous soil and how during flooding, how it reacted.
Yeah.
I would like you to tell the viewers that particular incident, because I was totally inspired after that.
So we started our practices of organic farming, which is manuring, which is mulching, which is intercropping, which is growing diversity, food forests, planting border trees. And it started having an effect on the soil fertility. Our soil started getting porous. Our soil particle size started increasing. The larger the particle size, the better is the soil. The smaller the particle size, it becomes compact. It doesn't allow water to go inside. But all this was theory and some that we were observing. But last 3 years back, and from that time, we have been maintaining photo data and video data. When there were heavy rains, last year there were extremely heavy rains. When it rained, in our farm, we were there in the farm, the lowest spot where the water collects, we were sitting and watching it. Within 17 to 18 minutes, all that water went into the farm. Nothing flew out of the farm. Nothing drained out of the farm. And our neighbor's farm, who's a chemical-based farmer, he grows grapes and pomegranates. He tills regularly. He applies close to 150 chemical, sprays in a year. His land, the water stagnated for over 24 hours. He had to manually remove the water by, making a channel. And that water then went out and went to the river. And then again, they pump it up for irrigation to their farm back. Now, why did this happen? So our farm, has become porous. We have so many earthworms. A simple count tells us that in 1 square feet by 1 square feet, we have close to 10 to 20 earthworms in 2 or 3 inches of depth. So that's more than 25 to 40 lakh earthworms in an acre. And one earthworm in a year can upturn 1 cartload of mud entirely. And while doing that, it makes these burrows in the soil, the Indian earthworm. And that makes the soil very porous. So we understood that our entire soil had become very porous. The water easily seeped inside. And this is real water harvesting. When water goes in the ground and recharges groundwater table, building a dam and blocking water is artificial water harvesting, because all that evaporates. You can't grow anything on that land. So we saw the water seeping inside. And the land became fluffy immediately within half an hour to 1 hour. We could walk through it. So our root zone of our crops were immediately able to breathe. But in his case, the land has become a hard pan. Regularly tilling and regularly spraying of pesticides and chemicals killed all the microorganisms. So there is nobody left to make his soil porous. And it's become a hard pan. So nothing seeps through inside the soil. And then when water accumulates, it suffocates the root zone. And then you have your trees dying. So we saw that, and we see this every year. This is not only in a flood year, but in a drought year, we have seen that our farm withstood, close to 40 days of no water. Whereas a neighboring farm had to get 250 tankers of water to ensure his crops survive. They couldn't withstand more than 4 days of temperature and drought.
Oh my God, this data is like mind-boggling. This is amazing data. Yeah, it's really cool that, in 18 minutes, your land could actually absorb, your soil was so porous and it could absorb. Amazing, amazing. Tell us, what is mulching? And I know that by just this particular concept that you have popularized this so much that you completely topple the demand supply market.
So we, when we got to organic farming, we understood one of the main principles was mulching. Mulching means like you lay a bed sheet on your mattress. It is laying a sheet of all farm, what we call waste. It's actually not waste. It's gold. It's carbon. Your leaves, your twigs, your cuttings, your prunings, your branches, everything that you get out of the farm, except the fruit or vegetable which you can take out and consume or sell. Everything else needs to go back into the soil. This is energy. The plant has taken sunlight over 12 months. It's taken moisture, it's taken nutrients, and it has produced the branches and leaves and twigs. And you're burning this. Farmers burn this, and burning of this farm waste has led to airports being shut in Delhi for 2 days, has led to air pollution rising, has led to many suspended particles in the air which affect your lungs and stuff and cause you diseases. But farmers don't know that what they're burning is gold. This is carbon. And if you lay this carbon as a mulch, as a layer over your soil, it will, one is help you to save water loss evaporation. It's very simple. You lay a layer, it doesn't allow water to go to the sun directly. So you're saving 90% of your water. You require less water. You require less water infrastructure. You require less motors and wells and bore wells and lift irrigation and pipelines. And there's so much of cost associated with all water infrastructure. You save on that. Secondly, when you lay this mulch of dried leaves and twigs and branches, under that, there's an entire universe of microbiology that starts developing. They get a space to hide. It's dark. It's full of moisture. It's moist, and they grow out there. All your fungi, bacteria, nematode, protozoa, earthworms. This is feed for earthworms. Earthworm needs carbon to grow and multiply. And then you have a plethora of them. They multiply in billions, and all these then go into your soil and make all the unavailable forms of nutrients available to your root zone. So you're just building a housing structure for all these beneficial creatures that ultimately help you to farm. So mulching is simply laying a layer. The science will get activated and function itself. What you need to remember as a layman is to not burn any farm waste. You can, as far as possible, cut it in small pieces and put it, but lay all the farm waste in the root zone of your garden or of your farm. That's mulching.
And not only that, you've successively made it such a big demand. Before it was available in excess, and today it's in big demand, isn't it?
Absolutely. So we come from a sugarcane belt in Western Maharashtra where I stay. 90% of the farmers grow sugarcane. There are many sugar factories, and it's a monocrop that's grown over years. When they remove the sugarcane, per acre, there is at least 8 to 10 trolleys. That I'm talking about entire large trolley, four-wheel trolley, full of sugarcane dried leaves, which they collect and they burn.
Oof.
And we realized that this is one of the best mulching that we can get access to. So whatever was from our farm, we took it and we mulched. We started collecting from neighboring farms. We told them, boss, we don't need to invest in collecting also. We'll send our co-workers, they'll help you collect, and we'll get it. You don't burn it. And because burning is risk, it might burn their house, it might burn neighboring crops and all. So they were more than happy to share that with us. And we started getting this mulch and laying it over everywhere in our farm, just spreading it and composting it and mulching our crops. Then they realized that, suddenly we were requiring less water. Our soil profile was increasing. And during droughts, we could sustain droughts because the mulching was very strong. And then farmers around us started taking their own sugarcane leaves and mulching in their own farms. And now we have a situation where, the farmers, we are not getting access to that mulch because they're using it. So many farmers around us have now started using their sugarcane leaves for their own farm mulching.
Yeah, this is such a fantastic example of how something that was available in excess is now becomes a scarcity. And this is a scarcity which we love. We love the fact that it's being used so much. Really amazing, I must say. I really love the fact that you really integrate you're very sensitized about the voiceless animals, and about what the worms which are under the soil. The sensitivity that you are displaying is very, very admirable. And I also want to know, how did you come up with this concept of welcome crows? Because we have only heard of the other one where we scare the crows away. You welcome the birds, you welcome the crows. I would like to know more about that. And how did your mind envisage something like this?
So when we started, decoding organic farming, we understood that the farmer is nobody. You're just a medium. What you have to do is allow these creatures to live on the farm, and they contribute to you in the long term. Now, if you look at it the short term, you won't find any gain from all these microbial creatures, and which are both under the soil and above the soil, and the bird species and varieties. But when you look at it from a very long term, they contribute tremendously in pest management and increasing soil fertility and improving biodiversity. And for us, somewhere, this thought of the farm is mine, the entire thing is mine. I am the only sole owner of this. I have to take everything of it. I have to spray pests, I have to, shoo birds. They should get nothing. This is an appeal to us. I think when you gravitate towards organic farming, you cannot do organic farming unless you are sensitive about many things, unless you are subtle, about many concepts. Otherwise, for money, you can never do it. It's difficult to have the patience and do the practices, because they require a lot of hard work, and they require tremendous patience. It takes 7-8 years for you to settle down in organic farming. So I think the precondition for doing this kind of farming is you need to be very, sensitive to all these ideas. And when you are, and when you understand that, these creatures are a part of this entire biodiversity, and it's, what you're growing is also, you have to appropriate to them also. Suddenly this shell drops, and all is mine thing goes away. So when we are farming, we're very clear with our co-workers also that don't expect 10 sacks an acre. What is ours is 4-5 sacks an acre. The rest has, either birds will take it, either the biology living below the ground will take it, or whatever. But then learn to live with that. Don't, scare anything away. Don't kill anything. Whatever is left after all these creatures have had is what is rightfully ours. And then we will think about how to, imbibe sustainability into that to make sure our farm is financially sustainable. So we go with the very fundamental mindset that, it's theirs. Out of 10, 3 or 4, 3 or 4 parts is theirs. The remaining is ours.
Okay, very nice. And that's how you welcome your crows into your farmland.
Yeah, so we did that. There were many crows, and people put these scarecrows to scarecrows. And we were out there saying, they basically come and sit and eat it. And that name came up and found it very contradictory. People call it scarecrow. We thought, let's call it the welcome crow on our farm.
It's amazing. It's wonderful. I think definitely being sensitive that we are not the only ones living here. There are other organisms also living. It's an amazing thought.
Absolutely.
It's amazing. I know that, last 2 episodes, we've been interviewing people who are actually working towards making India a garbage-free India, a sustainable paradise, or somebody who said, how we should go without using plastic. Zero waste, sustainability has been our entire energy in the last 2 episodes. And your farm is a zero waste farm. It's a self-sustainable farm. So tell us about it.
It's a zero waste. I would say it's a carbon positive farm also, because zero waste is only, you're taking in 10 and you're giving back 10, you're zero waste. But in a concept like this, where you're harvesting all the sun's energy, you're taking back all the farm residues, you're mulching it, you're promoting so many biodiversity and microbial activities to happen. You are taking so much of the energy and harvesting and putting it back into your soil. So when you start farming, if your energy is 100, after 4 years of organic farming, the energy you have harvested is around 400. So, it's a carbon positive way of farming. There's no concept as waste. Everything recycles. The leaves, twigs, branches go back, only the fruit is removed. They go back to fertilize the farm, which gives you more. Again, they go back to take the fruit. And again, this is a cycle which keeps on happening. In net, you're in the positive. as a business also, when you come out of the farm where our processing happens, we have ensured that all our facility in the village is now solar powered. So we generate more energy than we consume, and we're giving it back to the grid. So all the little energy that we require to process our food, to pack our food and stuff, now comes from our solar system. And in that way, also we are energy positive. We also have implemented to an extent using electric vehicles on the farm, where we charge them to get our, to go to the cow shed, to go to the farm, to get small things and stuff. And those electric vehicles help us. For long distance, of course, you cannot use that solution, but wherever possible and however possible, we always take that special effort to remain carbon neutral.
Wow, that's
Our
amazing.
entire packaging is of cardboard. It's of paper. It's of a cloth that is made by these small women's groups. Basically raw cotton cloths and stuff. Except for some 20% items which need a plastic coating like a flour, otherwise moisture will seep in. 80% of our entire food is packed in recyclable, materials. So even that way, we have tried to do that.
Amazing, amazing. It's really, I think we can't get enough of you. See, one of the things, is it true that if a farmer who is doing conventional farming and he wants to switch to organic farming has to actually leave their land vacant for them to start doing organic farming?
No. If you leave it vacant, of course it does, the land does heal itself and nature heals itself and all. But if you act as a catalyst and if you start farming on that farm, which is chemical, and you want to convert it to organic, you can hasten that entire process of converting to organic. Because when you are there, you'll be growing green manure, you'll plow that green manure back into the farm, you'll increase soil, green manuring, you'll mulch, you'll grow, various types of crops, you'll manure the field, you'll do so many activities that will hasten the process of converting your farm to organics. You don't absolutely need to leave your farm vacant or do nothing to it. That's a wrong practice. You
Okay.
farm actively on it, stop using anything on the soil, any chemicals, and your farm will turn organic faster.
Okay, how lovely. Is it also true that the production per hectare is far lesser when you do organic farming to conventional farming? Because this can act like a big deterrent for people to get into organic farming,
Yeah, so realize that one is, from the last 40, 50 years, we have been practicing chemical-based farming. We have exhausted all the carbon in the soil. We have burned the carbon in our soil. Initially, when you did a soil test, the carbon, the C/N ratio, which tells you the health of the soil organically, that's carbon to nitrogen ratio, was around 1%, 1.5%. In the Amazon forest, it's around 2.5%, 3%. That's how healthy soil out there is. In Indian soil, we had a C/N ratio of 1.5%. Today, if you do a soil test, that ratio has decreased to 0.01%. We have literally burnt all the carbon in the soil. And when you burn carbon in the soil, even if you administer synthetic based fertilizers, it is going to give you no returns, because even that, to react and to fertilize the plant, it needs carbon. So one is we have exhausted that carbon thing.
To the production per hectare when it is less.
So now realizing that you have done this over the last 40, 50 years and the C/N ratio in a soil has gone down, when you switch to organic practices and when you stop putting chemicals inside, of course, you will get a hit. If you're producing 10 sacks an acre, you will go down to 5 and 6 sacks an acre, because you have suddenly given a shock to the soil. You have turned it organic and it is used to chemicals. There is no microbial life in the soil. There is no carbon in the soil. The soil is not yet healthy, and you want it to produce as much as you want from a chemical-based farming. You have, 50 years. What you've done in 50 years, you're expecting to undo in 1 and 2 years. It's impossible. Good things take time. It's not a fast process. What you have done in 50 years will at least minimum take you 5, 6, 7, 8 years to undo, to build carbon in the soil, to get microbial activity in the soil, to increase soil fertility. It will take you that amount of time. So be realistic. There will be a fall in productivity. You can compensate for that fall in productivity in different ways, where you can sell your food at the right price by making consumers aware that this is good quality food that is nutritious.
That's exactly was my next question to you. The one of the way you can make organic farming viable during the period of entire transition is selling it at the right price, isn't it?
Absolutely. So it's like any other commodity that you buy in the market. You pay a higher price for a commodity that's better in quality and that benefits you. You'll pay a lower price for a medicine that doesn't benefit you as much as for a medicine that benefits you more. So food is medicine. Now, when I, as a farmer, am giving you a papaya that is desi variety, that is not fiddled around it by science, that is full of seeds, that is so rich in taste, that's whose nutrition is 7-8x more than a papaya grown in a chemical-based farm. Why shouldn't I ask you for a higher price? I'm giving you more value. I'm giving you 7-8 times more value. Apart from the fact that I have in the long term contributed to saving global warming and ecology and biodiversity and water harvesting and so many other things that contribute indirectly to your well-being and to your future generations' well-being. So when I am doing that kind of farming, I will command a higher price. And if I do not command a higher price, how would you expect other farmers to come onto this bandwagon? It's a demand supply thing. It's economics. When supply will increase, then prices will rationalize. Now, from day one, if you want organic food cheap, why will another farmer grow organic food? He'll say, boss, it is so much effort. I have to change my practice, wait for 5-6 years for my product to go up. And then I'm going to get a price that is same as chemical-based farming. So why will I ever do it? There is no incentive for him to do it. So I think consumers also need to be aware of the fact that, you have to pay and I would never call it costly food or cheap food. That is the right price of food. You have to be conscious about this and pay the right price of food for your own health benefit, for the earth that you're living in, for the future that you want to create, for everybody's benefit. You have to pay the right price of food.
So you are a certified organic farmer. So what is this is it a very difficult certification to get? And if somebody wants to get into this particular field, how important it is to have the right certification?
So certification is I would say it's a compliance thing by government. The word organic, you cannot use it unless you are certified organic. There are certification bodies, independent parties who are accredited by APIDA, which is the government of India's, agricultural produce, and that committee who gives the accreditation. You have to enroll with these certification bodies, and it's a process of 4 years. When they come for the first year, they start enrolling your farm. They will do an inspection. They will check all your record keeping. There are certain do's and don'ts which you have to follow. Every year they will come repeatedly and do that inspection. And at the 4th year, you will get your 100% certified organic farm certificate, on the basis of which you can call your produce organic 100%. Today, people use the word loosely, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, because it's not easy for a simple farmer to do all this theoretical work, record keeping, paying fees, audit, and then get that name organic and then use it. So, they use the word organic, which is okay, but by law, by compliance, you cannot. It takes 4 years for you to get certified. It's a bit cumbersome. It's a bit cumbersome.
Patience is the key, I guess.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that I have gathered is, since you are in a place which is not very close, and many people are having organic farming done far away from big cities. So processing becomes a very important aspect. Otherwise, you are short selling yourself. So how important is processing when you get into organic farming, or you can do without processing your food and selling it in that manner?
So, when we were producing the farming food and stuff, we realized that fresh food has a very limited shelf life. There's only so much you can do in those 4 days, gather it and sell it. And our farm is geographically far from the city. It's 150 kilometers away from the city. So what do you do? Now our food is pure. There's a market for it, but you have this constraint of fresh, going bad, and we don't have the infrastructure and the resources to put up a cold chain on the farm, off the farm, till the consumer and stuff. So we decided, why not make some form of food which can last for 6 to 8 months and allow us as a farmer to gain financial independency by selling this for 6 months. So we started converting the sugarcane into jaggery. We started converting the moringa, the drumstick trees leaves into moringa powder. We started converting the milk to ghee. We started converting the groundnuts to peanut butter, to wood pressed oils. And while doing all this, we ensured that our farming practices were pure to the maximum extent. Even our processing practices should be pure. They should follow tradition. So all our products do not have any kind of additive, preservatives, binders, fillers, no artificial substance, no artificial colors, no artificial essence. We have kept food 100% pure the way it is to be. And we only make food that is possible in this fashion. So it gives us that shelf life. It gives us that 8-9 month shelf life to keep selling our produce to consumers across geographies, and helps us gain that financial autonomy and sustainability to continue our practices on the farm also.
Also, listening to you, obviously you have actually cracked the way organic farming is done, and it is very clear in your head, and you both together have shared the responsibilities and have come up with a wonderful concept of how organic farming should be done the right way. Have you ever thought of putting up a training institute or training more farmers about this? Is it part of your vision?
So we didn't think of anything formally. For us, apart from being farmers, we have to keep this entire setup economically viable. So we are 4 days in the farm, we're 1 day at the farmers market, we're 2 days handling technology, putting our e-commerce shop. We run a dispatch center in Pune, we're employing people, we're handling many livestock. Processing is there are licenses, there are branding, marketing, digital marketing. There are many other activities where we are entrepreneurs, we're farm entrepreneurs, we're agripreneurs. So we need to keep the entire show running, and it's all a startup. It's all dependent on us. Now we're getting a very good, fantastic team and co-members who are helping us do all this. So when the topic of training comes in, yes, we do have some learning, some experience that we have imbibed, and we share normally across platforms. So like tomorrow we have 10 farmers coming down to the farm for an entire farm day visit. On an average, every month we have close to 250, 300 farmers who come to the farm, who come out here and learn. And in the last 6, 7, 8 years, we have addressed close to 9,000 farmers going in their village. They have organized seminars, they've organized some activity. We go and speak about it. And then we handhold those farmers who are really interested through the entire life cycle, from seed till harvest till processing. And we get them in our value chain. But formally to put up an educational institute or to put up a course has never come to our mind. For us, sharing this knowledge is a duty. We haven't learned all this ourselves. We have learned it from fellow farmers across India, from really amazing people. And whoever comes to us, so everything is very transparent. You can come to the farm, you can learn, you can see the processing, packaging, everything is open to everybody. Many people have come, learned, and we have more than, I think, 50, 60 brands that have popped up, taken inspiration from what we were doing across India. And it does mean that there's a risk because people copy our ideas and copy the products and copy the practices. But when you're on a farm landscape and when you're dealing with nature, you understand that needs to flow out and to come back to you also. And so this is how our education bit happens. It's not formal. We don't see something formal happening very, very soon, because we have this entire onus of running the entire entity, and it requires our attention and time. But wherever possible, when people come, like your platform, we're sharing some practices with you. There is no holds barred. Everything is open to share. Tomorrow, when those 10 farmers come, they'll be with us for lunch, for breakfast, for close to 6-7 hours. No holds barred. We'll share every practice with them on the farm.
So it's amazing that it's free flowing. Mother Nature has given you this knowledge and you're sharing it with all of us, and I'm sure a lot of people are benefiting, and we're really, really happy. I love that entire multiple crops, how you do an analogy between how humans need partners and sisters and aunts and uncle, and how even the plant kingdom needs some relatives around them. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So the kind of cropping pattern that we have imbibed on the farm that I mentioned is a mixed food forest. So we grow papaya, banana, coconut, chickpea, tamarind, aola, jamun. We grow close to 12, 13 varieties of fruits. We also grow many Indian indigenous forest trees like, bahua, rakta chandan, There are 14 varieties that we have that don't give any fruit, but that add to the ecosystem. So our idea is to make a forest that's unpredictable, that's mixed, that's random. And why? Some people ask us why. Why? Because that's what the soil needs. The soil is not built to monocrop. The soil is not built to take only one nutrient. When you polycrop, when you do a mixed food forest, somebody is a monocot, somebody is a dicot, somebody will sequester nitrogen, somebody will take it. Their root systems, speak to each other. There's a symbiotic relationship in a food forest. And I always give this analogy that, it's like us alone. If you were 100 Satyajits or 100 Sandhya Shrees living, you would get bored, you need
Yeah.
a brother, you need a sister, you need a partner, you need a mother, you need a father, you need an aunt, you need an uncle, you need so many other relatives to make your life socially rich and for you to grow as a person. Similarly, in the tree ecosystem, they need many different varieties and species of plants for them to, grow holistically. And this is something that we must have as humans kind of deciphered. But if you observe nature, if you keep a land open in the jungle, without any seeding, cropping, anything, say a 10-acre piece of land, and you come back to it after 10, 15, 20 years, you will never find one variety which has grown in that 10-acre piece. There will be close to 100, 200 different varieties that have come and all have flourished and all are growing. So that's how nature unfolds. That's the design of nature. We as humans have cultured our minds and our farms. That's why it's agriculture. You're culturing the entire process. You need to get out. You need to just kickstart that ecosystem and just be a vigilant observer of how it unfolds, and then derive your livelihood from it in the least destruction way as possible.
Really, truly an out of box thinking, I must say. As we have understood from where you've come, we've understood how a farmer should go about it. Okay, as a consumer, a person like me, how do you make organic produce more affordable? Because that is the general viewpoint a consumer takes. He says, oh, it's too expensive, So what do we do? How do we tell the consumer, no, this is the right price?
See, pricing, it's not realistically, cheap and costly. You have been conditioned over the last 30, 40 years to buy food cheap, due to various political systems in India and stuff, because everything is for votes and they want food to be cheap and free, because of which all that loading goes on the farmer. The farmer is told to produce more and more and more so that government can, subsidize food to their vote banks more and more and make everything free, so that people vote for them. I'm talking of politics,
Yeah.
but it's associated with
Yes.
the price of food. And when you expect a farmer to produce more and more and more, how will the farmer produce more? He has to use more and more chemicals, and that's how he will get a productivity that can help sustain his farms. Now, and then government subsidize. So what you get ultimately is food that is heavily chemically polluted, that is heavily subsidized. It is not the right price of food. In these last 60 years, we have destroyed so much of carbon from the soil. We have destroyed so much of soil fertility. We have destroyed so much of fresh water reserves. We have destroyed so much of native, indigenous, heirloom varieties. You won't pay that cost now. We have started paying that cost, but our next generation will surely pay that cost. So what is cheap? What is costly? Tomorrow you're ready to pay 10 times the price to get health back. You're ready to pay 10 times the price to get biodiversity back. You're ready to pay 10 times the price to get fresh water. You're getting fresh water by trains now to some places in India. But you don't understand that today, if you make this a system where people are paying the right price for food, it helps maintain all those, other aspects which you don't have to pay for in future. To give you data to this, there was a research done in the US, and it tells you that in the 1960s, a household spent 14% of its income on grocery and fruits and vegetables. Today, that same household in the US spends close to 7 or 8% of its total income on grocery and fresh fruits and vegetables. So it's not that, you don't have the capacity. It's not a priority in your mind. The priority is to get the latest iPhone 13. The priority is to get the latest MacBook Pro. The priority is to get the latest clothes, car, paint, interiors, television. That is priority. Food, I want food cheap. Why is that onion costing 40 bucks? Why is that onion not costing 10 bucks? Let's, girao government ko. It's such a mentality where you have learn to look at getting food cheap and at the cost of what? You know, why? Even you're in a trade, you sell your services to the guy who gives you the maximum money, right? You did an IIT degree, you did an IIM MBA. You will not go work for a guy who's paying you 10,000 bucks a month. You will go for the guy who's paying you 10 lakhs or 1 crore a month. So you're selling your
Yes.
services to the highest bidder. Why can't a farmer sell his services to the highest bidder? Why is he, Essential Commodities Act, cannot sell outside, cannot export? You are exporting, you're an IT engineer, you can work for Microsoft and Google, you can export your services, but a farmer can export his services and his goods. So somewhere he is retained, and you want the
Yes.
entire system to function on his raw material by keeping it cheap. So that is being insensitive to what is happening. So go beyond
Yes.
that market, go beyond that shop, and see how the farmer functions, and how that right price is so important for everything else to function.
It's so true, Mr. Satyajit. They say organic produce is expensive. They should think how expensive cancer can be to cure. So if they start,
Absolutely. Yeah.
equating that way, they would automatically choose organic produce. See, the one of the things is, how will a consumer know he's buying organic produce? You are certified. Is it that all products which are organic come with a certification, and that's how we know we are having organic produce?
See, certification is one, that's a theoretical compliance thing. But more important than certification is knowing your farmer. How do you know whether your food is pure? It's a good question. Take that effort, fall out of your house, fall out of your daily routine, take 1 day off a week or 1 day off a month, go and meet the farmer who produces your food, where you're buying it from. If you're going to the mandi, if you're going to a farmer's market, attend farmer's markets. There are amazing farmer's markets that are popping up in your city, in your locality. Go attend it. There's a farmer who's selling directly. Talk to him, visit his farm, take your children out there, see how food is grown, see how that symbiotic relationship between so many other species that he lives with. When you do that, you're investing time, you're investing efforts to know where food comes from. And that is the best way to know whether that food is organic or not organic. Certifications aside, these are all papers that can build your trust. But a a self experience of seeing how the food is grown will go a very long way in ensuring your entire food chain is chemical free and organic. So know your farmer, like you know your doctor, you know your engineer, you know your architect, know your farmer.
Yeah, this is something, my colleague Captain Joseph always says this. He says, you need to know your farmer. He runs an organic store and a farmer's market. He keeps telling people, you need to know who your farmer is. You need to do a little bit of visits. And, I personally feel, apart from the government, because we are always expecting a lot out of the government, leave the government alone. There is a lot that the corporates or other NGOs or individuals like us we need to do. What is the kind of initiative should these people do, like a school or in college? What is it that they should do to make this future better for all of us?
So I think it is communities that build countries. Governments come and go. Governments have agendas. Governments are different. Governments are insensitive to many things. But communities that we interact with daily, the corporates that we work with, the schools that we put our children in, the other community institutions that we interact with, if they take some steps towards increasing efforts of spreading this awareness of good food and the cost of global warming and personal health, lifestyle diseases and stuff, you can achieve a lot. So while we were doing this, and doing it our own way, there was no set path. We were, we got many people who came together and came up to us and said, this is amazing. How can we put a platform where we can take this to many more people? That's what led to forming Organic V. It's a not-for-profit initiative in Pune, which we run with 17 other like-minded individuals, everybody from different spheres of life. Everybody contributes their time and efforts free of cost for this. And Organic V, then we started working via Organic V with schools. We have now established organic farming clubs in schools in Pune and Mumbai, where we are teaching children, and we salute the principals for having signed up to this. The Bishop School in Pune and the Polymath School in Mumbai, where the principals have agreed to grow food on school campuses. We told them, what's the logic of growing, shrubs and bushes that are well cut and well maintained when they don't give you anything? Why not grow food? Why not grow vegetables and fruits and a biodiversity and grow it by children? Let children work with their bare hands, bare feet in soil. let them also understand, along with an iPad and a touchpad and everything, how important it is to work with a kudal, fauda, khora, tikau, khurpa. All these are essential instruments which our forefathers used to grow food, and growing food is such a life essential skill. If they don't know from where their food comes, if they don't know a radish grows in the ground and a drumstick grows above the ground and a potato grows in the ground, it's such a disconnected
Yes.
universe and
Yes.
individual. So we have kind of running these clubs, and it's voluntarily. We have not forced anything on children. Yet we have so many children who sign up for this. They remove their shoes, socks. They take a kudal. They dig. They plant. They mulch. They manure. They harvest. We run farmers markets in those schools. So this is what we can do as limited in our limited capacities. Because I told you we have many other things to run. So we invest 1 or 2 days a week in that. But as a corporate, you can spread the awareness. If you meet a farmer in your locality who's doing good farming practices and you're consuming from him, write about him, share about his work as stories, put his number out there on Instagram, Facebook, spread that awareness. You share so many other things and forwards, do that bit to understand the farmer and share about him. If you have had an experience with a good brand or a product or anything, share about it, talk about it. These upcoming startups and brands are working against a large industry, working against big behemoths to pop up and to make some activity or do something is so very difficult. So who is his proponent? Who are his advertisers? It's consumers like you who have to speak about him and his produce and propagate that farmer and advocate him. This is, I think, what you can do. In corporates, you can arrange lectures by organic farmers, by holistic farmers, by permaculturists, by natural farmers, make awareness. People arrange, lectures in IT industry about technology and stuff. It's such a monoculture. Teach those guys this cross-pollination will also help them in their main jobs. Teach them how so many other activities happen on the soil, how farming is done. So and that's what corporates can do. They can own a cause. That's what schools can do. They can own a cause. They can showcase it. They can support so many other ecosystems and communities around them.
Yes. So it's basically, they say everybody wants to show a child a miracle. I would just say show a child how to plant a seed, put a seed into the ground and then it grows into a plant and then a tree. There's a miracle right in front of them. They should all show them. It's like, farming is one of the fantastic ways to show you can bring life back into this planet. Do you have any suggestion for books, documentary, Netflix movies that we can watch to take this forward and make our knowledge more deeper?
So to start with, you can watch, you can read many documentaries. There are books. You can start off with this amazing farmer, naturalist farmer. His name was... it's a book called One Straw Revolution by Masunobu Fukuoka. So One Straw Revolution is an amazing book. The guy spent his time spiritually farming, how he did this entire natural farming revolution. It gets stuck to you and then it grows on you. That is one. To know about the dynamics and the scientific aspects of this kind of farming, you can follow soil microbiologists like Dr. Alien Ingham. You can follow Rodale in the US that does this. You can also attend lectures of Padma Shri Subhas Palekar, who speaks fabulously on these subjects of natural farming. If you are a Netflix guy, you can watch this amazing documentary called Kiss the Earth. Kiss the Ground or Kiss the Earth, I think it's amazing. It will just encapsulate all this in a 60-minute film. Fabulously done. You can watch that. Apart from that, there are many books, but you can start with these.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So to all the viewers who are watching us, I want to tell you that his farm is open for general public to visit, learn, and be around him. So directly going into the Q&A, open to Suman and Mr. Satyajit and all of you who are watching.
I'm sure we had a very intellectually stimulating lecture by Mr. Satyajit. I'm so glad that I heard you in Maitri College seminar, and I requested Sharan to have one session by you. So,
my pleasure.
And, I was exposed to Sharan 3 years ago, and when we were told to consume organic, obviously, even as consumer, my husband was saying that it's very expensive and it's not so easily available. And, not everything is available as organic. And you don't sometimes trust what is being sold as organic is actually organic. So these were the few questions which always kept cropping up time and again, and everybody was saying that we have been having normal vegetables and fruits conventionally sold. So, I mean, so far. But obviously, as a learned person, we all realize that, there is no cost to health. And what we put in our mouth actually controls our health. And even the farmers' health is, in fact, affected very badly because they are putting these pesticides and
Absolutely.
fertilizers. So there's a whole train which they call from Bhatinda or Abohar to Jodhpur and Bikaner, which is known as cancer train. So I think sooner we get, this fact clear to us that we should be careful for our health, for our planet's health, and of course, we owe it to our future generations. So we can't, just keep robbing the soil of its nutrients, and we need to do something. It's today or never. It's like that. It's very difficult situation. So there are obviously, a few questions because the audience is really interested. This topic interests all of us. And I'm sure, what you said, people are copying you, but original is original. So people who copy you will never.
I'm happy they're copying. I'm so happy because in their way they're helping 10 other farmers, they're helping 10 other consumers, they're developing 10 other acres of organic soil. So we're happy they're copying us.
We need actually multiples. I wish we could clone people like you, with your thought process, so that they could heal themselves and also heal the consumers. So there are a few questions. One question is by Harsha. How the birds are contributing, and please suggest for home garden, because you suggested for fields. So obviously birds would.
I don't know the varieties of birds that you should put in your home garden, but they come naturally. So for us, they came naturally and they contribute in a very nice way because one is they help in pollination.
Yes.
Okay, that's very important for fruiting. Second is when you have a tree which has a pest on it, the fruits or anything, a bird sits on the other tree which is not thorny or anything, it can eat those pests. So they do integrated pest management. Then their droppings are rich in calcium and stuff. So they contribute in various ways. These are ways which we have comprehended. There must be other ways which we have not yet comprehended.
They also disperse seeds from one place to another. So they are also dispersal agents. So birds contribute. And then the other question is...
it's just a, why think about this always as how it will benefit me? It's just a lovely pleasure seeing them chirp around you in the farm, That's a contribution to your spiritual growth.
So another question by Madhusudan is, of course, it has been covered. What we buy as organic is truly organic. So you already told us we need to know our farmers. And obviously people would ask, how do we know who is the farmer? So is there any directory of farmers which would be available?
No, just step out of your house. If there's a farmer's market, go out there on the stall, sit with him, talk with him, develop a rapport with him. Whenever possible, go to his farm and see how he's farming. Today, many farmers' sons are on Facebook and Instagram. Connect with them. Go and see the farming practice. If there's not a farmer's market, the mandi that you go to, try establishing connects with the end farmer out there. Take some efforts. I know it's not going to be easy. No one has done it in the last 10, 15, 20 years in your house. It's going to take extra efforts. But take that extra efforts to know where your food comes from. And then you'll find various other means and ways. Sharan is one of them where you can get access to that farmer.
And Smija is asking, we have snails and rodents who are eating our produce. So what do we do?
Oh, we have many snails. We have many snails in the farm. They absolutely do not harm any aspect of our crop. I think, when this harm in the crop is when you don't have enough of carbon, or you don't have enough of mulching which they can eat. So they start eating the root zone of the crop. So when you have to do you're manuring, but you're not mulching, or you're not intercropping. So one practice will not help. You have to be holistic in your approach. And then you will find that though there are snails, though there are many other creatures, they ultimately do not cause destruction to your main plant.
And there is a person from Sharan team who's asking that the vegetable plants are growing well, flowering also nicely, but no fruiting happening. So maybe because pollination agents are not there. Or...
Pollination, bees, birds, etc., butterflies, etc. check the variety that you have planted to start with, whether, what kind of variety it is. Check the season of plantation. Check the soil quality. You are putting it into a maximum vegetative growth. Prune it a bit so that it starts budding and flowering. If only the vegetative growth increases, all the energy gets into the vegetative growth. It will never bud and flower. So try pruning it. You'll get buds and flowering and fruiting.
So I think we've covered everything. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
I'm sure we've all benefited immensely. Thank you so much for
My pleasure,
sparing
madam.
your valuable time. And you are the
My
Anndaata,
duty.
you are the Anndaata, so you produce for all of us. And good food you are giving, and we need to pay the right price. I fully agree with you, that we cannot compromise and we cannot negotiate on when we want quality, we need to pay the right price. And we never ask this question to doctors, and never the pharmacists, when we buy the medicines, which are not also healing us. I mean, which are only managing the symptoms sometimes, and the problem persists. So if we put good food, I am sure we will not have to buy those medicines. That has been our personal experience while following whole food plant-based diet. For 3 years, I haven't taken any medicine. So no chemicals in my body, additional chemicals. So which has been, and we have so many of us who've experienced the same. So I'm so grateful to
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Satyajit. It is very important that our viewers understand going organic is just not a personal choice. It's a universal choice. Our planet requires it. And we are all working towards making this planet a livable one. And we need to do this for our children, for ourselves. And all of us who's listening, go organic. This is the most selfless thing that you can do. Let's support the farmers, and we are together in this. Organic produce is no longer expensive. With that note, positive note, let's sign off. Thank you everybody for joining us. Looking forward to seeing you next month with a new session. Bye everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.